This is Van! Joke lang po yun. Nakaka-LSS na kasi yung intro niya. Anyway, today I'm going to try some of the most common ways people use to allegedly test if honey is pure or not. I already have an older video explaining that these tests are not actually reliable and that the only real way to test honey purity is through proper chemical analysis. But for the sake of information and curiosity, I'll be doing this test using two samples, honey flavored syrup and honey I harvested directly from my colonies. So we have two honey here. This is my honey here. And honey I got from the supermarket, which is technically a flavored syrup, not honey. So just cover the name. So this is the same. And we're going to do the different tests on how to check if fake ba or real. So we're going to do both yung honey flavored syrup and sa honeycomb. The first is the honeycomb pattern test. They said that when you shake honey with water on a plate, the pure honey forms a honeycomb-like pattern. So let's try this one. Piting. Yan. Gamay, daghan man na. Anyway. And lagyan daw ng water. Ganyan ba? And then shake. Tama ba to? If may mabuo daw pattern is pure daw. Yan, nabuo. But it came from this. Next. Ito na lang gagamitin ko kasi sealed to. Yan. Yan din natin na nagsasayang lang tayo ng honey, guys. Anyway, hindi siya nag-drip. Water din. Same din naman. So, the second test is the water test. People say that real honey doesn't dissolve quickly in water. But in this test, you'll see that both the syrup and the honey are harvested behave very similarly. Ayan, hindi natutunaw. Hindi natutunaw. Yan, pag tinukot, pag sinakla, may makukuha pa. O, yan. Meron naman. With the honeycomb. Damihan ko na lang. Kasi tapos, nasasayang lang tayo ng honey. Yan. Yan. Hindi rin naman. Meron din. Next is the matchstick test. Here, I dipped matches into both samples until they were completely soaked. And the claim is that if the match still lights up, then the honey is pure. So, ito, basang-basa na to ha. Hmm? If pure daw, light daw ni. Light man lagi. Next, specimen number 2. Ala, di tinuod ako ah. Oh, tinuod man lagi. Same. Now the last test is the paper or tissue test. They say pure honey doesn't easily soak through paper because it has lower moisture content and is more viscous compared to adulterated or diluted honey. So, gawin natin yan. Double. I-double na nako ha. Sige. Apat today. Apat. Yeah. Up, up, up. Up. Hindi daw basa. Oh, so, hindi basa. So, same. Now, one thing I want to point out is that most of these tests actually rely on how watery the honey is. There's this common belief that real honey should always be thick and not runny, but that's not always true. The consistency of honey depends on many factors, especially moisture content, the type of nectar sources, and the environment. Here in the Philippines, because of our high humidity, it's very normal for honey to have slightly higher moisture content compared to honey from drier countries. So naturally, our honey can appear more fluid or watery even if it's completely pure. There are also other tests I didn't include today. One is the idea that ants don't go after pure honey, which honestly doesn't really make much sense because ants will go after almost anything, even non-sweet food like eggs. So there's really no point testing that. Another is putting honey in the fridge. Some people say pure honey won't crystallize, but that's not true. Real honey naturally crystallizes over time because of its glucose content. The rate of crystallization depends on the type of flowers the nectar came from, the temperature, and storage conditions. As for the taste, in this sample, my honey tastes more natural while the syrup tastes and smells more like straight sugar. So my honey tastes more like flowers, while the flavored honey syrup I bought tastes more like sugar syrup. I also want to point out that adulteration isn't limited to just making fake honey syrup. Another way it happens is by continuously feeding bees with sugar and then harvesting what they store. Technically, you are still harvesting honey, but the nutrients are no longer coming from flowers, which is what makes real honey valuable in the first place. What you end up with is mostly just sugar. So even if this simple test did work, they still wouldn't be able to detect that kind of practice. I'll say this again. The only reliable way to prove honey authenticity is through chemical testing. These tests analyze things like sugar composition, moisture content, and the presence of compounds that indicate whether the honey came from natural nectar or was adulterated. But since those tests can be expensive and not always accessible, the best thing we can do as consumers is to buy from trusted beekeepers. So that's all for today. Bye!